Today, the Homebuilder blowout fiasco. Hello again, it's Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics, web that is post covering finance and property news with a distinctively Australian flavour. Well, Senate estimates is on at the moment, and there was a very interesting interplay this morning. We're looking specifically at the question of the Homebuilder program, which of course was launched through the COVID period in an attempt to try and stimulate the economy. And there were a couple of interesting revelations. Firstly, that there had been a review done, which basically said it had worked as expected, but it also highlighted that the original budget was completely blown out. And as the questioning went on, well, more and more revelations came out which suggest that this program really was targeted at the wrong areas, the wrong types of activity, and was partly responsible for blowing up the costs of renovations and building more generally. And therefore, you've got to question whether this was good policy at the time and whether lessons have been learned. So I'm going to play the section from Senate estimates, which I think is pretty self-explanatory.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I'm particularly interested in housing, like so many Australians, and I'd just like to sort of get on the record where we are with regard to what the government's picked up at this point of time. So the Homebuilder program of the former government, these questions go to that. So what was the original estimate of the Homebuilder program? What would that cost?
I'd like to see if Ms Berger-Thompson has that information at hand.
So the original costing of the Homebuilder program was $680 million.
Thank you very much. And how much did it actually end up costing, Ms Berger-Thompson?
The current estimate is around $2.7 billion.
So, based on the government's numbers, proposed to cost $680 million, then you would call it significantly, you would call it a cost blowout to $2.7 billion. Is that correct?
So there were policy changes that contributed to the increase in the cost, but it remains that demand was higher than was expected, yes.
I guess this morning we were talking about how the government's going to work with the market and work in an accord to deliver good outcomes in the housing sector. But when governments engage, things change. And I guess I'd like to understand what's the impact of the Homebuilder program on construction costs.
So we don't have a precise estimate of that. It is true that I guess we would characterise that the Homebuilder program has contributed to capacity constraints in the construction sector, but has not been the only factor to do that. So there were also state government programs to support the construction sector, and also throughout the pandemic an increase in demand for, I guess, higher quality dwellings. There was also supply factors that have contributed to construction costs. So obviously supply chain disruptions globally from the pandemic, closed borders which impacted on the availability of labour, and the other factor is I've just had a mental blank. But I guess the broader point is there's absolutely a range of factors that have contributed to heightened pressures in the construction sector. It's very difficult to work out the precise contribution of each of those. The other point I would make is that with any COVID support measure, of which Homebuilder was one, there was a kind of a supporting demand aspect of that measure, but also all of these programs were designed not only to support demand but to support confidence and reduce uncertainty in the overall economic environment. So it's very hard to estimate what the counterfactual would have been without any particular program.
Thank you for that comprehensive answer, but I guess the reality is the government has the capacity at any point of time to turn on and to turn off these sorts of things as they gather information from Treasury and your assessment of what's going on in the economy. The construction costs I'm particularly interested in because it would seem that there was quite a bit of overheating. Is it fair to say, you called it construction costs rose, is that what normal people would call overheating in the market?
I think overheating is probably a subjective, you have to take a subjective perspective to that. I would say that it contributed to cost pressures.
Okay. And those cost pressures affect everybody who is building a home. So what has the actual increase in construction costs been over the last 10 years?
I'm not sure that I have. I'll just check to see whether I have that information, but I'm not sure that I do. So the only figure I do have is that material costs for the house construction industry, this is based on the ABS Producer Price Index, rose 17.3% over the year to June 2022. But I'm happy to take the 10-year increase on notice.
And what about the price of timber, board and joinery? Certainly I've been hearing a lot about that.
So the annual increase in that component was 24.2%.
Which is a huge increase. What about metal products and other materials?
18.4%. For metal products, and other materials was 12%.
Yeah, so significant increases. And do you have figures more recent? If you haven't got 10-year figures, have you got figures for a period of more recency?
I don't, I'm sorry.
Okay. If you could take that on notice, Ms. Berger-Thompson, I'd like to kind of sort of get the shape of what's gone on in that period of time. I understand a review of the Homebuilder National Partnership Agreement was actually released earlier this month. Is that correct?
So there was a review released very recently on the National Partnership Agreement. That's correct.
Okay. And are you familiar with that review?
I am.
All right. So, Ms. Berger-Thompson, could you provide us with an understanding of what that review found in its assessment of the Homebuilder program?
So there was a number of findings. I guess the first was that the program was successful in boosting demand for the construction sector.
You boosted it all right?
As it was intended.
Drove it through the roof.
Another finding was, I guess, around the operation. So it's important to clarify that this review is about, I guess, the operation of the agreement rather than a review of the effectiveness of the program itself, although it did make some comments about the effectiveness of the program. Mm-hmm. It had some lessons for the Commonwealth in terms of, I guess, the operation of that program. Noting that it would have been smoother and more efficient to establish and easier for the public to navigate if the earlier consultation had taken place between the Commonwealth and the states and treasuries. And there were some findings around data collection as well.
Okay, so two critical findings, data collection and a lack of coordination. Is it fair to characterise it as that between the state and the federal governments?
So I think the context of this is obviously that we're in the middle of a pandemic and very early in that pandemic. I think, there were certainly lessons to be learned that the Treasury will take away. That's a key part of actually doing these reviews, to learn lessons from the process. Mm-hmm. But given the environment in which we were operating, things had to happen at speeds that were, unusual and probably far from best practice in terms of those, some of those processes just to deliver money to people. So there are some extenuating circumstances around the circumstances at the time.
But to be clear, the plan was to deliver $680 million worth of investment, and that expanded and expanded and expanded to $2.7 billion. And that was a feature of the design of the Homebuilder program, wasn't it?
So I guess it was always a demand-driven program. One of the features
with an uncapped budget. Yeah, that's right. And I think one of the features of all of these COVID programs is that, and this is a feature of, I guess, how we think about how we do costings for the economic effect of kind of programs in general. There's obviously, and particularly with COVID programs, there are obviously general equilibrium effects, which means that what the program is designed to do is actually to increase economic activity overall. And so your estimate of what would have happened in the absence of the program is actually, an environment that you wouldn't, we were trying to prevent from a Treasury standpoint. So that's an environment where people don't have a lot of money, there's a high degree of uncertainty, all of those factors which would mean that demand for construction would have been low. So that is the counterfactual that the program was costed off. The fact that you actually had much more demand than was expected at the time is actually just a feature of the success of some of those programs. So the demand that was generated by this uncapped program, which didn't have a budget allocation that matched what ended up being spent, is now a historical fact, but it drove demand quite significantly in a very short period of time in a way that the government didn't expect. And the budget of $680 million blew out to $2.7 billion over the period of time that this was being managed.
So it is true that the original costing was $680 million.
And the final cost?
And the final cost was $2.7 billion, yes.
Thank you. I note under the Homebuilder program, subject to meeting all other eligibility requirements, homeowners could apply for a grant that would help not just with the building of a property but with the cost of renovating a property. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so I note that more than 24,000 applications for Homebuilder were grants to assist with renovations. Is this correct?
So I don't have that number on me. I do have that the total number of grants was 105,247, and the 18.
Sorry, could you restate that because I couldn't quite hear.
105,247.
125,000.
105,247.
Yep.
And that 18% of those were for renovations.
So 24,000.
It's not
about
too
the
far
right.
off. It's not too far off, but I don't know the exact number.
Okay, so can you explain what sort of renovations were paid for? 18% of this $2.7 billion that was unbudgeted by the government that went out went to these renovations. What sort of renovations were being paid for in this multi-billion-dollar government program?
So I don't have that information on me, but the renovations needed to be substantial.
Okay, so I'm just trying to figure out what substantial could mean. Could the renovation of the kind that you're talking about be to a new bathroom or the upgrade of a bathroom?
I imagine so, but I will just see if my colleague has any further information on the type of renovations.
Thank you.
Thanks. Vera Hollenstein, Assistant Secretary of the Housing Branch. It had to be at least a certain amount for the renovation. I haven't got it with me right now either. I believe it was 250 million, but I will have to confirm. 250,000. for a renovation in order to qualify.
250,000 for a renovation. Well, I've done a few renovations in my time, but 250,000 is a very, very significant amount. There'd be very few Australians really, that I mingle with who'd be able to just pop on a $250,000 renovation.
So similarly to the new builds, one of the goals of the Homebuilder program during COVID was to stimulate the construction industry, and the important part of it was that it would stimulate that sector, and so it was considered that being a substantial renovation or a new build would be an important part of the eligibility criteria.
So if I had sufficient money to be able to afford a $250,000 renovation on my home, were there any restrictions on what I could spend it on? Could I spend it on, gold taps in the bathroom, bidets in multiple bathrooms, a home cinema, an indoor swimming pool? Any of the above? Were there any restrictions, or could I build whatever I liked with my $250,000?
There were no restrictions on the type of renovations. There were also income caps that applied for the Homebuilder program.
Income caps? Well, can I just continue my line of question first? So income caps? Could you explain that?
So in order to qualify for a grant under Homebuilder, an applicant had to have income under a certain amount. I don't have those amounts with me, but I can take that on notice and provide that.
So to be clear, because Senator Hume is interested to see if you have evidence of people who built an indoor swimming pool.
Gold taps, bidets.
Yep.
All the things that you have recommended.
All of the things that I'm fearful your government might have ended up paying for people who already had a lot of money.
Put them in little boxes. Little boxes of social housing would be so much better.
I can take that on those. It's unlikely that we would have...
Point of order, sorry, Ms Holstein. I think Senator Hume needs to withdraw that comment. Little boxes of people living in social housing is an inappropriate way to characterise social housing, and all the Australians who grow up in it and rely on it and need that roof over their head. This is why you funded this instead of what people really need. You funded people who could already afford their own
just giving money to super
with the gold taps and the highs.
Order everyone. Order everyone. We have a couple of minutes left in Senator O'Neill's block. Senator O'Neill, you've got the call for a couple of minutes.
So do you have any of the details of the sorts of personal expansions of houses, up to 250,000 by your evidence today, that Australians were able to go ahead and build when this project of the government's blew out from $680 million to $2.7 billion?
Senator, and I will need to confirm the 250,000. We do not have any detailed information on the types of renovations that participants in Homebuilder undertook. The program was administered by the states and territories, but as far as I'm aware, it is not that the type of renovations is not part of the data that states and territories would have corrected. And I can just, my mistake, can I please state for the record, the renovations were, had to be above 150,000, not 250,000. And also swimming pools, granny flats, etc. were actually explicitly excluded.
Well, I'm happy about the swimming pools. So granny flats excluded and swimming pools excluded. But other than that, indoor cinemas, anything that you wanted in your home, you could, outdoor kitchens, any of those sorts of items that people might see on the home reno shows, all of that, if it was between 150 and 250?
Between 150 but not exceed 750,000.
So up to 750,000.
Yeah, and the value of the existing property, that is the house and land before renovation, was not to exceed 1.5 million.
Senator O'Neill, you've really just got one question left.
So, look, I might come back after the break, Chair. Thank you very much. I'm still sort of getting over the shock of how much money went into these renovations and how distressed Senator Hume was that it should have gone not to social housing.
All right, who would like the call from the opposition?
So there you have it. I think a sorry tale, and I have to tell you that I always knew Homebuilder was a problem, just didn't know how much of a problem it really was. It was a biggie. I'm Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics. Many thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next time.